Hi, thank you. Like Rajendra, I think I'm having this. I like to move around the floor because I can't stay still, but I'm not going to be as spiritual as you from India. I guess in Latin America, we have Spanish, Indian American, Arab, Jewish, African influences, and become a bit more deranged. So I'll sound a bit more deranged. So thank you so much. First, Christian, you are like a poised lion king, because with your personality, and your intelligence, you manage all this to happen. So thank you very much. So the team are amazing, but you get it done. And the other thing, it's a luxury to be here and the help that we received of the Volkswagen Foundation. It's fantastic. So first of all, a few things before we begin. I need 21 minutes. Being the last has pros and cons. One, the pros is that you've heard all the others, so you can connect the dots and fill in the voids of many things that I will not say. I am not a rigorous researcher. I do not have a doctorate. I do not produce data. I think I'm able to analyze data or to read data produced by others and to transform them into visions, design moves, and motivate people for implementation. That's what I'm good at. Everybody has different skills. I believe strongly in the power of design. I have not heard the word design many times, but the truth is that processes, socioeconomic, cultural, legal, all these things eventually influence the way we occupy the territory and we reshape it. So design is important in the equation. And I'm always very concerned when apparently researchers have to produce data and demonstrate anything, but they can't design. No? And Alexander von Humboldt came to my country by accident. The boat almost went down with an epidemic in the first days of 1800. And as a good German, he would measure everything, count for everything. How many tomatoes per hectare. But he also measured streets, plazas, size of buildings, types of homes. So he's also interested in the physicality and not in the numbers. So again, I'm highly interested in design. The thing I hope to demonstrate with the presentation is that the tools, it was a call to change paradigms or to think in new paradigms. That was one of the, and it was, I believe that many of the design and planning tools that we've used to the time, well, simply don't fit, don't adapt to the necessities, to the needs of most developing countries. There's a misfit. And unintentionally, by applying the traditional tools, we're harming the poor, would happen to be in the higher risk areas. So this is what I'm trying to demonstrate and what we can go in a different direction. Let's go, please. Thank you. Well, I guess we saw the quote many times that I shared with some of my colleagues. Thank you. Next. I'll make it. Of course, all these facts, we know that the Global South is urbanizing, producing some of the most complex agglomerations in history, and a large, high percentage of this urbanization is occurring as informal or self-constructed settlements. And of course, I'm not going into the positive attributes of informality, which are many of them, but there's not always a bed of roses. There's a negative side. This is my city, Caracas, by the way, a dual city between the formal and the informal. Next. They often lack infrastructure, mobility, community services, public spaces, and access to much better jobs and opportunities. And what concerns with this conference is that they frequently occupy peripheral sites that are geologically unstable, prone to flooding, to fires. They're on brownfields, on landfills, or whatever. So they're high-risk locations. Yes. So far, so good. And of course, this places the communities in disadvantage in relation to those that live in the formal city. It's a question of equity and exposing them to high risk with loss of lives and assets. Quite direct, I think. Okay, so to the moment, how have the planners, academia, institutions, politicians dealt with this amazing challenge? And by the way, the formal city has always existed, from Babylonia to Roma to Frankfurt to Paris. It all started in London. It all started as informal cities that then at some point we started massaging them and planning them and designing them. Just that the magnitude of this thing is of something never seen up to now. So, some of the things that we've tried to do. When I was National Director of City Planning, I came from Harvard University with a big ego. I'm going to solve everything. My office was in a 52nd floor of And it happened that all the plans that we were doing, and look at that, the green corridors, the block typologies, window typologies, everything typology. I was so happy with my three-dimensional planning and codes. As soon as we enacted the plan, rural land became urban land, and it disignited the real estate market. And of course, for the urban poor, nobody in this room can get access to housing, to a mortgage, without having a formal job or savings. So as soon as we enacted my great plans throughout the nation, 200 of these, we were pushing the poor out of the map exactly to the areas where all our studies said that they should be urbanized, which were the floodplains, the 60, 70% slope plains, and whatever. So without intending it, our formal planning was pushing the poor out of the map. Very stupid, no? Okay. Next. Then, of course, the problem is housing. Everybody, human rights, UN, and they're from Napoleon, housing is a human right. Fine. The thing is that in most developing global South countries, the demand of housing always falls, the supply always falls behind the demand. We try to build, and look, these are Corbusian mega blocks built in my country when it was a wealthy country in the 50s, and we built them, and 15 stories, 300 meters, whatever. Well, this is what happened. And of course, the virtue of the informality, that is a living machine where you can add, you can have shops, you adapt, can happen in 45 square meters in the 10th floor of a building with a broken elevator. So that does not have the benefits of this. Next. So this doesn't work. This morning, we heard from our Brazilian speaker about the virtues of the site and service programs developed in the 1980s with Turner, in which we were giving a framework that allowed to go from that to a formal house. And this is Alejandro Aravenas, for those architects, a Pritzker Prize winner a couple of years ago, with the same idea. You give them half a house and they complete. What I would say is that this is a program that has to be revised. The problem is that site and services works at a neighborhood, at a district scale, but it doesn't work at a metropolitan scale. And going back to the images, we have cities where informality is not 50 people or 500, it's 2 million, 8 million in Mexico City, 7 million in Lagos. These are huge metropolitan areas built by self-constructed minds and the heart of peoples. It's more complex than this, but we have to learn from this. Next. And then, of course, we have all that we have learned in the last 20 years of the improvement of existing informal settlements, where probably I have to say that my country was pioneer in the world 25 years ago that started all these studies of informal thing. And luckily, unfortunately, we hit a wall with the emergence of a centralized, militarized government, which what we've learned from Alejandro and for so many is that the improvement of existing settlements you can do with vision as part of the city, but you have to do it on the ground with the people, okay? And that's what we learned from Medellin. However, in the plans for barrios of Caracas, my city, you don't have to be a genius to realize that this person selected an inadequate location. It's highly unstable and he's going to lose his work. So those are the orange things that said, hey, we have a problem that we have to relocate these people because they're going to die. But one of the issues, and keep in mind, is that when we relocate people, nobody wants to go to Oklahoma. They want to be relocated right there. What do you do with the areas that you free to avoid reoccupation? And this we heard today and some more in these, I think yesterday. Next. Okay, and then comes La Pièce de Résistance, Maestro of Medellin, Echeverry, and all he's taught the world, and so many followers of these holistic operations that are proven extremely successful if we do it in an integral way. And that is fine. But again, I would argue that they're extremely effective, again, at the neighborhood scale. But even in these amazing neighborhoods of Medellin, with the gondola system, with the libraries, with Shakira dancing, with all that, people get up at 5 in the morning, take the metro cable, because most of the services are still in the formal city. So there are things that we can also learn from here. So, pa-pam. Next. And by the way, these operations I would call urban surgery, because you have to be introduce the changes very carefully, if not the organism died. And it requires substitution housing. And these operations are very laborious, to say the least, and they have to have the ability to do it and to negotiate. So they're very important, efficient, and laborious, and expensive also. So what are the challenges? Well, we saw the indicators these last days that the population worldwide living in new informal settlements will double in only 20 years. 1 billion people living in new informal settlements in only 20 years. That is crazy. So the general idea of this is, what do we do? Do we wait to have the same problem that we've had throughout the world to operate a la Medellin, or is there another way to approach in a preemptive way? And that is the title of the section that we're presenting to you. So, and again, I would try to emphasize that housing in most places is not the problem. People know how to build their home. The problem is the lack of a landscape, of an urban, of a support system, of framework that assists the self-construction, allowing to achieve what they can't achieve on their own. Housing is not the problem. And I try to reduce all this in this book and research called the Informal Armature Approach, in which, as we heard today also, apparently if we find a hybrid, a combination between the virtues of informality and the power of creative design, planning, and management, we're creating a robust ecosystem that can benefit of both, with the formal and the informal. The book in English is called Planning and Design for Future Informal Settlements. In Spanish, it just came out with the support of Echeverry and EAFIT in Colombia, La Salle University in Bogota. It is a longer version, more case studies, more graphics. The two books are out there, and they are a donation for the university. So what is this all about? I think that this new approach to the challenges of informal urbanization, one, it has to be preemptive. We've heard many times within presentations the importance of being landscape-driven. It has to do with the physicality, but also with the management, with the implementation, with being kind to people and transmitting love and creating trust. It has to be multi-scalar, because we're dealing with small things, with small communities, and then we're dealing with 3 million people. So how are we dealing with all the things at the same time? Something very important, it focuses on the public realm. It is extremely selective in the moves. This is very important. Traditional planning that came from the Corbusian schools, that we still have in many developing countries, try to control everything like a machine. What we've heard is that every culture, every place is different, and thus our efforts have to be very selective on those aspects that will make a difference according to each locale. And something very important for me is that we have to find a way to secure the spatial requirements, the physicality of place, to cope with the changing demands. Because in traditional planning, in Germany, we say, that is good for a park, or it is a protection of the floodplain, and you say, Achtung, verboten, out. Okay? But in developing countries, you do that, and the next day, people have invaded. So we have to find a way to secure those spatial requirements, to keep people out of the risk areas, but also to gradually respond to demands of urbanization. How do we do this? So far, so good? So I suggest there's a very great author, Professor Graham Shane, who's known a lot in Europe, especially in Italy, from Columbia University. He says that all planners and designers have a system of design components. From the Romans to Corbusier, there are certain things that facilitate communicating the design process. And these are some of my design components. I suggest one that has to do with the ones that I call corridors, which are essentially are the mobility system of flows, of water, of people, of goods. These are the skeleton and the veins of the city. And then you have these patches that go into that like organs in the body, and those that have the little dots, what they're saying is we provide land to facilitate, to enable self-construction in adequate places. So we're fostering the process, we're helping the process. And then those that don't have the dots are the certain uses, I will explain later, that we aspire that any balanced city should have, which are, we want schools, we want hospitals, we want market, we have cultural areas, we have transportation centers, we have hospitals, that if we don't find a way to do it, the informal sector will never have it. And thus it will be in a condition of submission in relation to the formal city. And finally, the little dots that you see here that I call the stewards are certain elements that are more acupunctural, that work over this and over that, and in a way act as catalyzers of change or transformation, and also safeguarders of the areas where we should not occupy, and catalyzers of the things that we do want to do. I will try to explain what they are. So far, so good? Okay. Now, these corridors, I suggest, imagine that this is the tip of an informal area that is growing. Here we have 1 million people, and that if we don't do anything, that whole thing will be completely covered of informality. But of course, as any landscape architect would do, they say, we have to analyze the risks, we have to analyze where the watersheds are, where the fertile land is, and those areas we should protect and make it part of the system. But the thing is not only legal protection, it's mapping them, detecting them, and then finding a way to associate with uses in a very simple and cheap way that the community understands that is relevant to live and take advantage of these, let's call them green corridors that we're protecting. If we don't find a way to engage the community, then it was a futile exercise of mapping. Then, if that is protection, we have tools to say, where do we locate people and attract them to where it should be? So let's assume that in this hypothetical, that line is where we should concentrate the activities. And you say, come here. Again, it will depend of every country what is the attractor to the area. I always make fun with my Brazilian friends that if we put 5 football, soccer courses in Brazil, all the Brazilians will be in the middle. But in a country like Zimbabwe, with Harare, with very few people with access to potable water, if we have potable water along that line, that will be the first attractor to go to the line. So it depends from one country to the other. So far, so good? Okay. And then, of course, with the support systems of the corridors, we have the patches with the dots where we are facilitating the self-constructed process. And again, it could be from complete random crazy things like they do in my country, in Caracas or in Brazil, or it could be, look at this. This is planned. This is Colombians. Colombians are methodic, because this is the product in lower flatter lands in Colombia of informal developers, private developers that solve the, I don't care, or you can do it as site and services. This is an experiment on campus with my students that we're able to design a community and build the bones of the community in 72 hours with sticks, because we're doing it as quick as people invade the land. If we cannot operate at the same velocity at which informality is growing, we're losing the battle. And again, this goes back to the affair. If I'm a mayor and they're telling me we have to do research and we have to 5 years of the mapping and we have to interpret, I'm dead. In 4 years, I'm gone. And if I'm doing the research, and meanwhile there's 150,000 new people living in the floodplain, my research is not helping. So we have to combine the power of research and mapping and data with the urgency of action. Okay. And then we go to the dots here. I'll give an example. Many informal settlements are located next to landfills because they extract material for the construction. And of course, these landfills tend to be a disaster. There's no organization. You're taking out metal and wood and plastic, but you have hospital waste, okay? A disaster. What if we have here a formal recycling center to help provide materials to the construction of the initial settlement, and after we have 500, 1,000, 50,000, then, and after 5, 6, 10 years in the territory, the people that are there are already urban, they already have informal jobs, they're getting larger income, they're not scavenging, they buy the material in Home Depot, and we move the recycling center to a new frontier. But then we liberate the 4 or 5 hectares of the recycling center, so we're able to have the park, the school, the manufacturing. If we don't do that, we will never have the park. Let's do an analogy with the red line. Let's suppose that that line is the best place for a transportation system. Rickshaws, a bus, a BRT, a metro, whatever. A city of 7 million eventually will have an extension of a light rail or a bus system or whatever. Good burros, I don't know. But that is the line. So what if the line in the first 10, 15 years, it is community gardens, which are 3 kilometers long by 200 meters wide, and we're planting black beans that we can have 2 harvests per year in most developing countries in the tropics. And we have an institution that fosters the community garden, even if we have to fence that thing off. But that's the only way that we're going to have a mobility system and a big spatial system to be able to address the needs. So as you see, this is transformative landscape where you're planning for the immediate needs of the 500 that are there, knowing that there will be 1 million. And you're planning it on the land, attending the vision of the community. But a vision of the community that just has arrived from a conflict area can't imagine that in the future, this person is going to need a mobility system or a hospital. So that is where the magic of the technician comes in, using the knowledge of the cultural knowledge, but at the same time, all the data and all the academia and all the professional knowledge, and bringing these teams together and operating with a vision that is close and vision. Well, okay, I think you're getting it. Next. Okay, and then you have the little dots, which I call the stewards. This is an image of the Medellin. In the plan for the district of Echeverri, this band that you see here, this boomerang, was a very geologically unstable area. And the community knew it, because instead of being very dense like the rest, above and below, they were very dispersed. Now, if you see the plan for the holistic plan made by Echeverri and his deal, he would say, get out. This is not an area that we can consolidate because it's high risk. The problem is, how do we get them out and avoid reoccupation? The suggestion here was, through public intervention, you stabilize the most stable of the unstable, you group the things, but the community cannot do it on their own. There has to be a technical support that then allows the relocation. And what you do is that you place the schools, the institutions, at the edge, and you give them custody to the area that has been devoid of houses. And there you have the agriculture, the land stabilization, the water management programs. But if you don't have these institutions, that area would be reoccupied, and you use your effort. Okay. How many minutes do I have? Done? Nada. So I'm going to go very quickly for 3 minutes, please. And the 3 minutes are to say, let's go, that these general ideas, in order to prosper, require, number one. This is the genius of Fajardo, the mayor of Medellin, that made so many things possible with the genius, the technical guy there, and with the community. You need political support. Second, you need assemblage of public land. I don't know how it is in Africa because I don't know countries other than South Africa and Zimbabwe, but in Latin America, due to the colonial heritage, all the land is in private hands. So as soon as you plan, you're creating added value to the private landowner. So assemblage of public land to apply this thing is basic. It's a priority. Instead of building highways and whatever, you have to use the limited funds to assemble land. Second, training and knowledgeable and honest facilitators. You need people that have the understanding of the new paradigms, that have the wisdom of design, of management, and also have the power to communicate with love to sound convincing. These are Martians that we have to create. But this is the type of people, how was it, 1 to 4, that make a difference? These are the people that we have to target and to train to make the difference. And of course, this doesn't work if you don't have complete community engagement in the process. The last thing of this is that this is not a dogma, but the concept can be applied to very different contexts. I don't have time to explain them, but I will show quickly some of the images of how the approach can adapt. This is my country. 45,000 people died the 15th of December of 1999 with floods in the coast of Caracas. They were washed out to sea. This is a general vision of the rehabilitation of the areas that were completely wiped out of the map. Next. This is what you used to do with the single-handed hard infrastructure. This is what we propose with these filters in the mountains to filter the material, to slow down the edging of the flow, and that allowed to use the Gavian solutions and the relocation of housing. This is the first time that we started thinking in this type of armature. In this case, risk control of flooding. Next. Go to the second, maybe. This is Medellin. Go back a second. Medellin, The studies that this guy has made in his URBAM show that in the next maybe 20 to 25 years, there will be between 300 and 4,000 new informal settlements in Medellin. And Medellin, the informal settlements, as we saw from the great presentations, are growing to the higher elevations, which are the most unstable land. How much public land exists in Medellin? 0 meters. If we don't assemble the land and find out where we can locate them, the people are going to locate in the most unstable conditions, and we're going to have a social bomb, an ecological bomb in the near future. Okay. Cartagena, the tourist capital of Colombia. That is the historic district over there. This tongue is Chinese and narcotráfico investment and whatever. Every time I go, the city councils put another 20 stories in the zoning. That is in the tongue. And all this that you see here in informal settlements, have a look of the expectations of climate change for 1 meter in the next 30 years. Even the historic district, but not only that, the city is expecting to double in population in only 25 years. Again, with no public land. And where they're going to go? Around that marsh that you see, pushing, look at the barrios, pushing in to the Ciénaga, that they're land filling the marsh. 20 centimeters above sea level. This is already a drama, and another 1 million people are not planning ahead in a preemptive way. I think you get the idea. So how do you keep these areas from occupying? Like in this case, the best way is to start flooding the area, to create barriers, to let the waters in, to start generating new mangroves, which are very important in the ecology and the fishing and the economy of the area. But if you don't have that wet thing that people cannot go in, they're going to go into the marsh, and then we'll have 1 million people that we have to take out with climate change in the future, and so on. And these are the big metropolitan moves. Boom, bam, bam, ba, ba. This was an amazing case study in Chamangas, Ecuador, that was hit by a horrible flood, quake, only 2 years ago. And as Professor Singh told us, you're dealing with effects there that come down. Here the effect was, and we saw it in one of the great presentations from the Guayaquil doctorate student, they eliminated 90% of the mangroves of the region to include fish farming. Okay? And of course, without the mangroves, the sediments are going down, okay? And the people are building on slush, okay? You have a quake, that's the end, okay? So the rehabilitation is not only the houses, the rehabilitations have to do with the bringing back the mangrove communities. There's many research on how to do that, but you have to do them with the people, with the schools, okay? Okay, and all these things can be possible with mangrove rehabilitation things. It's done, it can take 10, 15 years, but if not, you're never gonna stabilize the area. Okay, coming to an end, push ahead. This was a case study in Bandaharo in Indonesia, but I'll move it ahead. This is one in Harare, where the problem was filtration, because here the problem is, again, cholera, because there's no potable water. This was a beautiful case study in Valparaiso, where we had a gift of the Australians. 70 years ago, they introduced eucalyptus to develop the wood industry. There's nothing worse for desiccation of a terrain than eucalyptus. Some areas are raining more, some areas are going dry. Chile is going dry. Every 2 years, you have forest fires in the stupid eucalyptus plantations. When the wind blows the wrong way, it hits the informal settlements. They're not built in cinder blocks like in Brazil, Venezuela, or Colombia. They're built in wood. 30,000 people lost their home only 2 years ago. With Echeverry, we went there 2 weeks ago. They had already been rebuilt. People are resilient. Yes, repeating the conditions to lead to the fire, because there's no political commitment to remove 200, 300 meters of eucalyptus. Put a nice, simple road so the firemen come. Create ponds with a tractor so you can capture the water in the rainy season and use it in the dry season. They're basic, simple things if there's political commitment. And so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Finally, I show these images that we presented in Habitat in Ecuador. The disease idea of the informal armatures is the best way to tie the formal and the informal. Because one of the highest risks is inequalities and resentment. And if we don't stabilize both sides, then we have the highest risk, which is social explosion. And I said it as a Venezuelan, that we were the 5th economy in the world in the 1950s, and now it's a piece of shit where people are dying of hunger and the lack of antibiotics. because we did not understand how social equality had to be managed. And the solution of the revolution was worse than the malady. So what I'm trying to do is spread the word, go with pilot projects, induce further research, and a call for immediate action. Merci.